Warning, this podcast contains adult language and is not suited for children. Welcome to Squared Circle Sit Down with your hosts, Drake and Joe, the podcast where we talk about all things wrestling. Available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are available. So, Joe, I know we generally like to have a little bit of back and forth conversation, but I know you've been dying to talk about Survivor Series.
Yes, dying because Survivor Series killed me. I'm going to start a timer right now. I just hit 1 second because at a certain point in time, I'm going to look at this, realize how long I've been talking, and just stop mid-sentence and say I'm done. I don't understand what Survivor Series is, and I want to be fair to WWE because we did a great show last time about Full Gear and how awesome Full Gear was, and we went and we sung the praises of AEW for close to 2 hours, and that was great, and Full Gear made me excited to watch a weekly wrestling show. That's what I said. And I wanted to be fair to WWE, so I tuned in and I watched Survivor Series. I sat through the whole thing. Genuinely, I've liked several Survivor Series shows over the years. I think they've had awesome concepts with great matches that feature almost everybody on the roster because they love shoving everybody on that card. But what the hell is Survivor Series now? Just what is it? Because I don't think WWE knows. They love sticking everybody on the show. It's the one night a year when Raw and SmackDown go head to head, except for all the weeks leading up to it, the show right after it, WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, probably a draft special here and there, and every other show that they feel like running where they need talent to jump from one show to another. So I don't know what to make of that anymore. There are no stakes. There are no title matches. Nobody wins anything. And they can't even do math. They can't do math. There are 7 matches on the show that feature some form of Raw versus SmackDown. One of them is a battle royal where everyone from Raw is attacking Raw people and everyone from SmackDown is attacking SmackDown people. So they clearly don't care about their brand winning. And then you go from like all the championship matches of head versus head and all that stuff. It's weird. Some of these feuds don't even exist except for the last couple of weeks. Becky versus Charlotte being probably the only notable exception. But you have these matches and there are 7 of them. So you would think that if there's some type of suspense in all of this, that you're going to tell the story of a better brand versus a worse brand, or it's close because you want them to appear close. Like, you have control over this. You get to pick how the card is laid out. There's no contract that says, oh, I have to go on first or I have to go on last. No, you get to make these decisions. And yet you have a situation where there's the pre-show match of Shinsuke Nakamura versus Damian Priest, which I actually liked. Shinsuke wins via disqualification, and after a pretty solid match that gets the crowd warmed up, SmackDown goes up 1-0. Cool. Hit the main show, give you the best match of the night of Becky versus Charlotte because it's the only match of the night that has a really big story associated with it, and both of them showed up. Quality match, start to finish, legit ending. I liked it. Okay, Becky wins. It's tied up 1-1. Then you get some standard average WWE pay-per-view matches for most of the rest of the night where Raw proceeds to just win over and over and over again, winning, I believe, 5 in a row. So they're up 5-1 going into the last match, which is Big E and Roman, which has no stakes, mind you, besides this semi-personal feud of Roman and the Bloodline versus Big E and the New Day, even though Big E's on Raw and Roman's on SmackDown. Okay, fine. They've kind of built that up a little, but there are no stakes. Neither title is on the line. The winner doesn't get anything. And Raw has already won the night. Even with Roman winning, SmackDown has still lost. This did not matter. Fans could get up and go home. It is over. You did not do any math here. you couldn't have switched things around even a little to make it closer. Or I get it, you were building up Omos for the Battle Royal win, but like you couldn't have given that to a SmackDown guy just to have the math, you know, try to have some suspense there for your main event. No, they didn't do any of that. So I ask you, and I'm hitting almost 5 minutes on this thing. So I want to stop talking for like 30 seconds even. What the hell is Survivor Series? Because they don't know, and I don't know, and I don't think fans know. And going into it, you saw people like Becky and Xavier Woods actually making statements about this, besides building the teams. But what is this show? What is this for? It feels antiquated at this point, which is sad.
I am inclined to agree with you on pretty much every part. And it's almost funny because there was a time where you could make the argument for Raw blowing SmackDown out because it was the flagship show, right? There have been times where that's very true. Now it's definitely not the case. If you look at the way that USA and Fox have treated their respective brands, and even the way that they're presented on, like, in the kayfabe of those shows, that's just not functionally true anymore. And you could argue maybe that neither show is the flagship, but in my opinion, it definitely is SmackDown, and I think they make that pretty clear fairly often, which made this even stranger. Not getting too far off topic, I think Survivor Series is suffering from the same issue that a lot of their gimmicky shows suffer from. Without the ability to do long-term invested booking, which gets harder now with the releases and stuff, it becomes hard to make stakes that are relevant, to make things matter. They did this draft, which I don't think was like a long time in the works. I'm pretty sure that someone woke up one day, Vince McMahon woke up one day and said, it's time to shake these rosters up, let's do a draft. And that's why we were getting a draft. And even if that was like 2 or 3 months ago, it wasn't that, or 2 or 3 months before they did it, whatever. It wasn't that long before they did it. And I think that also is just so harmful to the concept of Survivor Series, where, yeah, you have 2 ways to go with that show. Either you make it brand supremacy, or you have to give us a Survivor Series match between people on the same show, on different shows, it doesn't matter, who have a reason to be fighting each other. And
or
that's,
you kill it completely.
yeah.
Or you kill it completely. You admit that this is an outdated concept and it's dead and you don't need it anymore. It doesn't need to be called Survivor Series. Invent a new name. But I don't think that needs to be the case. Much to what you just said, there are options here on the table. And I think this ties in really, really well to something else we wanted to talk about here. And that is NXT, where I think what we talked about a month ago now about the finish of Tommaso Ciampa versus Braun Breaker for the NXT championship, of some people were upset that Braun didn't just win the title outright. And I said, because it feels like a WWE half step. Survivor Series feels like the ultimate WWE half step. They have 1 foot in this pool over here and 1 foot in this pool over there of, well, Survivor Series has been around forever, so we have to keep the name and we try to honor the tradition of these Survivor Series matches. But also, it's going to be this thing about brand supremacy, and in order to make that work, it has to be Raw versus SmackDown, and we need a tagline. So the tagline is going to be, oh, the one night a year, which is so garbage. It's such a garbage thing, because anybody who watches your damn promotion, not even for the whole year, but for a couple of months, knows that that is absolute bullshit. And it's insulting. It's really insulting. And it feels like you've given up on this, but also want people to still be invested in this concept. And that doesn't work. And that's why I think so many fans kind of turned on that idea of, you're not willing to commit to a new guy for this new look of a new promotion that you have out here, or a reinvention of this promotion out here, because it's like, you're telling us this is new, different. And then when it comes time to actually deliver new and different, you back off a bit. He's still there, and he still probably will be the next champion, but like not yet. And I know we can disagree or talk the nuances of how that's going to happen. And I still agree with you, it's going to happen and it should. But it's another one of those WWE things of, is this gonna be Survivor Series again? Is this going to be a thing where you want both, but give us neither? Or you give us both, but neither are good? And it just sits with me the wrong way. And again, I'll just say the one positive thing about it again. I did like some of the matches on Survivor Series. I do think the people showed up. I don't think anybody was out there putting on a bad performance besides the Battle Royal, which was kind of garbage. And I think the women's SmackDown versus Raw 5-on-5 was a little sloppy. But by that point in the night, nobody was really invested in this stuff anymore anyway. So who cares? But besides that, conceptually, Survivor Series as a whole, WWE as a whole, so non-committal.
I think that's a perfectly valid point. And like I said when we recorded that episode, I will not fault anyone for feeling that. I think Survivor Series this year absolutely could have been fine. They didn't keep score anyway. So if they had just not, in the weeks leading up to it, leaned into the whole, brand supremacy, fight for your brand, you can still do Becky Charlotte, you can still do Big E Roman, we can still have these matches that feel like they are show versus show and have a reason to be, and then do in-house Survivor Series matches. There are plenty of situations they have on both Raw and SmackDown with the stories that they're running that could have been, take this storyline with like Nakamura and Rick Boogs and Madcap Moss and Happy whatever the fuck they're calling Corbin now, and pair it with like the Usos and the New Day that are feuding. So now you've got 4-on-4, stick 2 more guys in, put Sami Zayn on one side, have a guy who beat him who's clearly part of the conspiracy be on the other side, and there's your SmackDown Survivor Series match. You still have your women's champions fight, you still have your world champions fight. It doesn't matter if you have your mid-card champions fight, and not to get super off topic here, but I have so much to say about the Intercontinental title and its value or lack thereof. And you're fine. You could have done everything you wanted to do, continued to progress storylines you wanted to progress without being forced to be like, well, I guess they'll walk out mid-match or, kick their partner in the dick and walk away because that's really the only way we can do it. Yeah, they boxed themselves in way too much because, like, seems to be a problem for them often, and I won't keep repeating it because you pretty much have alluded to it. They are too stuck in the traditional formats that they use, and in doing so, it prevents them from sometimes taking the obvious route to putting on a good program.
And there are so many moments that you can point to over the years. Like I said, non-committal, and it really does feel that way for so many things where they seem to have faith in someone for a little bit and they'll give them a little bit of rope, and then right when it seems like the crowd is really invested and it's time to pull the trigger, they just don't. It's a weird thing where it almost feels like, and this is a little bit of a dated reference now, but they're trying to reinvent the Honky Tonk Man's Intercontinental title reign of, ooh, we'll just do something they don't like long enough, and eventually they'll just eat up whatever happens because they want the change to happen, except for the fact that we're no longer living in that late 80s, early 90s mindset of, we have 4 pay-per-views a year and we can wait till the next one, with bated breath to see who's going to be the next challenger. No, you're having somebody like Roman Reigns mow down challenger after challenger after challenger, and you're going to run out of people. That's a problem. That's a legitimate problem, because if you're not making the next guy to beat somebody like Roman Reigns, if there's no plan there, you're going to run out of real estate really quickly, and then it turns into Roman Reigns is just champion and nobody knows who's going to beat him.
Before we get into that, because I want to talk about that too, I have a question for you. How do you like your eggs prepared?
Oh no. See, I'm not much of an egg person. Just personally, it's not my favorite type of food. I appreciate a nice breakfast omelet on occasion, but I don't pay $100 million an egg for it.
How do you feel about if they're poached?
And the podcast is canceled.
The end. Yeah, that's where we ended. That's the send home line. No, just real quick because I know you don't want to get into it, and that's okay. And I know you want to move on from Survivor Series, and I'm super cool with that too. But just for half a second, I have to. Holy fucking shit! Almost from top to bottom, the way that they've reintroduced and started pushing Austin Theory. You're timing me. That's fair.
Oh, I'm timing you because I have one thing to say to this also, and I'm going to time me.
So the way that they have used this as the vehicle to push Austin Theory is so fucking painful. Right down to he stole it because he wanted to take selfies with it, and somehow that makes Vince, a man who spent most of his life existing before cell phones or selfies existed, think of himself. That reminds him of himself. Fuck. Okay, I'm done. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, the bait and switch of The Rock. How so much of this show, Survivor Series, mind you, on very short notice, turned into a 25th anniversary of The Rock's debut celebration. The Battle Royal was a 25-man Battle Royal, I think, which makes no sense, to be fair to Raw or SmackDown being short one person. But they did that anyway, and all night long they're showing you these flashback moments of The Rock and his career and his great moments, some of them specifically at Survivor Series, teasing the connection with him and Roman, teasing the connection between WWE and the Netflix show with The Rock and everything, and the egg, and that's how the egg comes in. Like, The Rock is going to show up. They're teasing this Rock versus Roman Reigns match, and it goes absolutely nowhere. The entire night, absolutely nowhere. People there were upset because it seemed like, okay, Roman's going to beat Big E, and then The Rock's music is going to hit. Or something's going to happen with this egg that's gone missing, and something's going to happen, and The Rock's music is going to hit. And nothing. And the next night, nothing. And I don't know if this is going to be mentioned again at all.
So fantastic meme that I saw online the next day. I think I shared it with you. The next time that you drunk text your ex and don't get a response, just remember WWE spent an entire show devoted to The Rock, who then would go on Instagram and post about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah. It's like he didn't even know the show was happening.
Yeah, yep. That's exactly what it was. And it's fantastic. It's so funny. Okay, so you wanted to talk about Roman. And we can definitely talk about Roman and how they're lining people up and knocking them down.
Yeah, it's a great juxtaposition to what we were just talking about with NXT. Of NXT, even if you don't agree with the pacing of the plan, at least it kind of seems like they have a plan. For the most part. Like, it's an experimental test bed for people to hone their skills and get better, and kind of the who does WWE want to invest in, which sounds a little malicious, but that's what they do. And, for better or worse, that's what they do. And so with NXT, you can clearly see that Braun Breaker is a star in the making for that. They are heavily invested. He's going to be champion sooner or later. On the main roster, I've said to you before, usually Survivor Series was a moment, kind of like you could put a pin in this moment of who's going to main event WrestleMania, or at the very least, who's going to fight for a championship at WrestleMania. So many instances in history, you could point back to Survivor Series and say, oh, bam, I have an idea. At the very least, I might be wrong, but I have an idea. I have no idea. I have no idea for Roman, especially. I see with what they're doing, they have lined up now Sami Zayn, they're teasing Drew McIntyre, even though technically that match has happened already. And, of course, the return of Brock Lesnar. That's 3 people. And obviously Sami Zayn is not going to beat Roman Reigns to win the championship. I mean, I'll be very surprised if that happens. I don't know that Brock would, because I don't know that they want to give Brock another title reign, even if it's short. And granted, Roman Reigns, that's also because of Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is finally in the position where he should have that lengthy title reign. But I don't see Drew McIntyre connecting on the level where he should be the guy to beat Roman either. He would almost get the Roman Reigns response from 2015, 2016 if he were the guy that were pushed to the moon to beat Roman.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, what do you do? I feel like Roman Reigns should hold that championship till I don't know the number of the WrestleMania that's coming up right now.
Then their plan worked because that's why they stopped numbering them.
But it's what, 39-ish?
I
Something
think
like
so. 39 probably sounds right.
Cool. Roman Reigns should lose this championship at WrestleMania 40 to somebody that I don't even know if they're on the roster right now.
I do. I know who he loses to at WrestleMania 40.
Who?
Braun Breaker. That's who he loses to. The reality is, you're right. There's no one there. There's no one there. And it would be really funny to watch the audience reaction to a face Brock Lesnar beating Roman Reigns in the position that Roman was in or that Brock was in originally, where he's just mowed down everyone and there is no answer except for Brock. Because realistically, that's what they're doing, right? They're positioning Roman to be their full-time Brock Lesnar, in that he can come close to losing. There are guys who can challenge him, but there's no one that can beat him. With the exception of maybe Finn Balor, who lost because of magic that we never got into. Whatever. Fuck it. But he's not even on the same show anymore, so it doesn't matter. But now we have the situation where, yeah, there's no one on the card who beats him, except maybe Brock. So he might have that really long title reign. It's not outside of the realm of possibility. They've wanted to do it for years now, to make Roman the guy. They did it with Cena for damn near a decade, where he'd lose it for short periods and then keep it. And Roman's got years left on his career. He's not going to Hollywood anytime soon. So I think the guy who dethrones him, not the one who beats him maybe for 2 or 3 months while he goes and deals with another problem and then takes his title back, probably will be Braun Breaker. Horrible fucking name.
Yeah, because there's nobody in the works. I'm throwing up quotes around that one. There's nobody that it feels like they're grooming to be the next star in a few years. They just don't have that person lined up, because in NXT, those people still feel really, really green. And the ones that are at the made level are guys that have come off the indie circuit, who are already in their mid to late 30s, who are not WWE guys. So they're not going to be the ones to do that. And on the main roster, there's nobody really in the mid card that is at that stage where they're new. There's somebody that is starting to get a little bit of momentum. They're fine-tuning their character. They're getting a couple of pay-per-view showcases and wins here and there, or something like that, or maybe a mid-card title reign. The closest, I guess you could say, is someone like Damian Priest, but I don't think they have the highest investment in someone like him to become a world champion that's going to dethrone someone like Roman.
And he's on the wrong show.
Well, if you have a year and change,
sure,
they could have 6 more drafts before WrestleMania 40. The way that WWE decides to do these things, where Vince McMahon wakes up and says, actually, you know what? I want Damian Priest on SmackDown. And Damian Priest is on SmackDown. Damian Priest could have 3 different titles on SmackDown, because at the rate that they're just throwing titles on the floor, he could just pick one up. But besides that, he's somebody I know who I think is also getting close to 40 years old. So I don't think that they're looking for someone like him. I think they want the guy to beat Roman Reigns to be a 30 to 32-year-old who has been in their system for 3 to 5 years, that they've really started building up and putting momentum behind. The name I threw out to you who maybe fits the bill was Ridge Holland, because I think he's a guy that really doesn't have any connection on the main roster. He has a little bit more experience. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he has enough time where you could start to build him into somebody that the crowd gets behind. And I'm giving it almost a year and a half here. So that could be almost anybody. But it's also, who does the WWE want that to be? Because you have to start now.
So Ridge Holland is 33. I looked it up. He's definitely young enough to do it. I haven't seen enough of him to speak to whether he is going to be a top guy or could be a top guy. So I take your word for it if you feel like he's someone who they could realistically be all right, give him a year or two and we can make him someone. I think that this is a really interesting period in wrestling, especially for the WWE, where obviously a company that's been making record profits for quite a while now and has seen a financial resurgence, right, is very reluctant to change their strategies because they're still making money hand over fist, so really, why does it matter? But at the same time, yes, they have to worry about future proofing, and they don't have the same kind of system that they used to because not just AEW, which is the obvious option, but all these other independent companies that are starting to become bigger fish in the pond, right? Like going to Japan and having that be your full time thing is not a crazy thought anymore. Going to Impact as like your primary and then running to a bunch of other indie promotions over the weekends or when you're not taping can make you more than enough money to be comfortable now. GCW is getting a lot bigger now. You have all these options where you can legitimately make a career for yourself without ever touching the WWE or even just going there for one contract, getting the TV experience and then moving on with your life, where they also can't sort of hold it over everyone and go, well, when the time comes, we'll pick who we want because this is who we have. And part of that also stems from the way that they're doing releases now. You have a lot of guys who could have been guys you invested in who are gone, both the men and the women. But you have guys who were literally made men. Keith Lee, I could rant for the next 20 minutes about that, but I promise I won't. Keith Lee, who's not the youngest guy in the world, and maybe is not capable of performing at the same level after everything with COVID, but we really don't know, that they released despite the fact that he was a home run, right? They had him lock, stock, and barrel. Fans were buying into it. A guy like Brock Lesnar was willing to put him over and make him look like a beast in the Royal Rumble. Everyone was sold on Keith Lee, and they sent him out the door. And so you look at now the rebuilding of NXT, and you have a similar problem where you have guys like Adam Cole and Bobby Fish, who were never going to be the major guys in WWE on like Raw and SmackDown, but they were the foundation of that show, who are no longer confident or comfortable continuing with your program. You have guys like Johnny Gargano who have yet to sign a full-term extension, and I can't blame him because, again, what's the point of staying in that company now? Because yeah, you can be financially safe, although I'm sure Johnny Gargano is financially secure after the amount of time he spent there, but you can be financially safe elsewhere now, but your spot is going away. The best that you can hope for at this point, if you're a Gargano, if you're a Ciampa, is the guy who gets the guys they care about over. So do you stay in this company? Is this really your retirement plan? Especially when you look at guys like Bryan or on a smaller scale, Adam Cole and Bobby Fish, who could go to the other company and carve their own path and still be over. And even if you're not a champion, be more relevant than just, well, clearly you're here as a mechanism to get over the guys we care about. You could be a lot more. Do you want to be? And so because of that, it makes it really hard for them to consider anything right now because they're going through that reset on NXT. So guys like Braun Breaker, guys like what's his name, the NPC,
Von Wagner.
Von Wagner. You
Yes.
have these guys, Tony Baloney, these guys that you're just
Joe Gacy,
great one, who are just kind of being introduced in the role that they're in and will need a lot of time to breathe and grow and learn and become stars eventually. But yeah, it has the problem of now you've got this gap. Now you've got this gap where what do you do in the meantime? Do you just have Roman hold the title for 10 years?
The reason why I jumped to somebody like Ridge Holland is because it's a guy that I know, I don't know because I don't work there, but I know that they will look at him and say, okay, yeah, we like you. You know, you're somebody coming from the athletic background. You definitely got the look. You've got the body type that they want. You're tall enough. You can probably work that style.
He's a rugby player, right? That's what
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and the reason why I went to somebody like him is obviously Keith Lee would have been the guy. He would have been the guy that I would have said, yeah, forget WrestleMania 40, WrestleMania 39. Keith Lee wins the Royal Rumble. Keith Lee challenges Roman Reigns. Keith Lee beats Roman Reigns. Cool. Let's go. That makes perfect sense. But then there's that other crop of guys that I personally think they should have really high stock in. Pete Dunne, Tyler Bate, where are they? Nowhere.
Forgotten.
Yeah, and Tyler Bate, okay, cool. He's doing NXT UK, where he's probably making a decent amount of money to appear on a handful of shows every so often and work a really nice schedule where he can stay close to home. Cool. I would dump a truckload of money at his front door to have him being built as a future Hall of Fame level guy for them, because he seems like a generational talent in my eyes. And then you have Pete Dunne, who is right next to him every step of the way, who has the character already. And why could you not build to a Bloodline versus British Strong style 3-on-3, where that would be awesome? Or even if you wanted to bring them in as heels and have them up against the New Day in a similar 3-on-3. These are guys that are that middle of the road build for WWE, where they're not brand new and nobody knows who they are, but they're not established and we know what their ceiling is already, especially on the main roster.
And they're not going anywhere.
Well, Pete Dunne might be going somewhere apparently, because like he may not be signing back with them.
Interesting. That
Yeah.
I did not expect.
Yeah, I don't know. He may just sign back with them again, especially because then he can stay with the other two in the same company. Mm-hmm. But if somebody makes him an amazing offer, why not?
Oh, sure. Because I was going to say 4 names that I think are super relevant to this conversation. Right? Tyler Bate, Pete Dunne. Those are the obvious ones. Guys who, the first time that they had like a match on WWE television, I looked at them. I looked at Crystal and I was like, they are the future of this company, hands down. And then you've got Ilya Dragunov and Walter.
Yeah. And Walter?
4 guys. Yeah. Each one wrestles a fairly different style. Each one owns that style, is a phenomenal performer with charisma and energy and talent and stamina, who could, in the right situation, be presented not as the top guys, but as those believable transitionary talents to face off against guys like Roman, guys like Drew when he inevitably wins another world title, or whoever else, Lashley, who could potentially beat them for short periods of time, like I said before, 2-3 months while they fuck off and do something else, and then drop the title when they come back to get their title back. It's believable, it makes everyone come out looking good, and it allows the guys who need the time to grow. And they also work as a bridge later on in a couple of years when it's time to bring up Ridge Holland, when it's time to bring up Braun Breaker, when it's time to bring up Tony, what is his name? I don't want to call him Tony Baloney again.
I have actually no idea which person you're talking about.
The Italian guy. His whole gimmick is he's Italian.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know his last name.
He's great though. So him and Joe Gacy, they're the bridges that once these guys come up to Raw and SmackDown.
It's Tony D'Angelo.
There we go. So these guys are the bridges when you bring those new NXT guys up to Raw and SmackDown, who they do their stuff, they take their losses, they fuck with Baron Corbin and Damian Priest and Shelton Benjamin and whoever else, and then you put them against Tyler Bate, and you put them against Pete Dunne, and you put them against Walter, and you put them against Ilya Dragunov, and now you have your next generation of talent. So when Braun Breaker comes in and stares down Roman Reigns because he's beaten Tyler Bate and he's taken down Walter, this is a guy who you're not just like, oh yeah, they're going to put him over because they really like him and he's hot. You could look at him and go, he's been doing things. This guy could beat Roman because they love him.
Yeah, it reminds me of JBL's title reign of sorts, where he beats Eddie Guerrero, who's a beloved babyface champion, and wins the title in a way that you never thought he would, and then goes on to defend it against Eddie, and then defend it against The Undertaker, and defend it against Booker T, and defend it against Kurt Angle and The Big Show. And then finally you get to John Cena shows up, and John Cena is this guy who has never worked with JBL before, and has never been in the world title picture like this before. He's been a mid-card champion, not as a babyface. He's never really been in the world title picture as a babyface. And then he gets to that moment. He doesn't have to win the Royal Rumble to do it either. Gets to that moment, gets that title match, and wins the title. And it's this huge crowning moment of finally this almost year-long insufferable title reign has ended. And it's great. Similarly, again, another thing we talked about last week, like Kurt Angle back in 2000 to 2001 had I think around a 6-month-long title reign that felt insufferable. Because back then the title hot potatoed a lot. But he beat, whether legitimately or not, he won the matches against The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H and The Undertaker. And he kept going and going and going. And eventually people look at this and they're like, oh, please, can he just lose? And then at the time, The Rock was already established, but The Rock comes along and beats him. And it's this big moment of, yes, finally, the thing that I wanted to end ended. And now I can be happy that the person I wanted to win won. Yay. Thanks.
And it's great that you bring up JBL because he is such a great example. And on top of everything else, so I don't remember if we've talked about it on here, but you know me very well and know that I will cheer for the heel whenever possible. I love rooting for the bad guy, especially in WWE. But anyway, JBL is such a great example because I could not fucking stand this man during his run. I tried so hard to just like devil's advocate. I used to have a lot of people over for the pay-per-views back then, and we would always have a lot of fun just doing whatever, and I'd always be the guy on heel commentary throughout the night. You know, Ric Flair picks a guy up and throws him into the steel steps. Oh, he was trying to help him back in the ring, poor guy. But whenever JBL would come out, it's just like, man, I need this guy to fucking go away. And it was great. It was perfect. And like looking back on it now, being the fan that I am, I'm regardless of the person, because fuck JBL the person, but the character I love so much because of his ability to do exactly that. You couldn't watch him for an extended period of time and not be like, fuck, I hate you, please just stop. Which was great, and I think that's why this is a great example. So, and I think that that's something very valuable that WWE has not taken advantage of, but has taken for granted, because if you look at the last couple of years, more than the last couple of years, those characters have kind of faded away to give way to characters who they want you to like, but don't and feel like JBL about, like Roman in the main event before all of this. Like guys that they did lean into it with, but the wrong way, like with Corbin. Corbin's a great example of that, where they went, okay, we want Baron Corbin to feel like JBL. Great. But instead of giving us a reason to actually dislike him and want someone to beat him, it was just straight up, I don't want him on my TV. I don't care. He's slapping dog food in Roman's face, and I couldn't give less of a shit. He's joking with Finn Balor about living in a dollhouse, and I just don't care. I love Finn Balor, but I don't even want to see him beat Baron Corbin. I just want Baron Corbin to go away. And that hasn't really changed, which is also a shame because I really want to like Baron Corbin, but I can't, and they constantly do stuff like that. The Kurt Angle Baron Corbin thing was a good example of that too. But that's getting really off topic, and we can go really far and talk about that. But instead, let's pull us back into like where we are now, these young guys, and more importantly, the continued rebranding of NXT.
Yeah, and that's something that I think they're continuing to push further and further away from what NXT was. I think if you asked the average fan who did watch NXT, they would consider NXT one of the big successes of the last 10 years of WWE. And I think WWE looks at it and says it's one of the big flops. It's a failure. It did not work out the way we wanted to. We wanted a third brand that could bring in a different style but still fit under the WWE banner. And now they look at it and they say, oh, nope, you're OVW, you're developmental, you're whatever you're going to be, but it's going to be less than. It's going to be its own separate thing, an alternative, if you will, to Raw and SmackDown. And that's why they've rebranded the colors. That's why they've changed around how it's presented, the style. I still do like a lot of the ways in which NXT 2.0 is presented, but now you have NXT War Games, not NXT Takeover War Games, because Takeover seems to be done. NXT War Games. I don't know how I feel about that yet, because I loved me some takeovers. They are some of my favorite shows that I've watched over the last decade. Maybe some of the best shows I've ever seen. I know it's still NXT. I know it's still some of the same talent, but it burns a little bit to know that that takeover name is not something I can look forward to anymore.
Sure, I agree. I think that it's really unfortunate how we got here. With that said, I want to make it very clear. I do enjoy a lot of the product that they've been putting out on the new NXT. I don't catch it every week, unfortunately, because there's just so much wrestling that I'm trying to consume. But whenever I do, generally they do a pretty good job introducing, pushing, presenting their characters, and the matches are usually from fine to good, depending on who's in the ring. Very rarely are they terrible wastes of time or what have you. They are definitely committing, in my opinion at least, and we could go back and forth forever about this, right? But in my opinion, they're definitely committing to a lot of these guys. Tony D'Angelo, exploded online, and I don't see them stopping that. Joe Gacy is doing fantastically. Braun Breaker is still like one of their main event guys. And it's really heartbreaking to see TakeOver go out the door. But like we talked about, I forget if it was our first or second episode, this is very much going to be a different product. This is not in any way what NXT used to be. We're not going to see the PWG style of show anymore. They don't want that third brand anymore. This is now a breeding ground, and that's all it needs to be, is a breeding ground. So it's going to be a lot more in line with what they want to see out of their future talent.
Yeah, I'm surprised we're even getting War Games. And I know that probably around the time they were doing the switch, they had a lot of this set up already to some degree, at least the date, the venue, the timing, all that stuff. But I do wonder if this is one of those times where maybe it's the last annual version of this show that we get for a while. Like maybe we will get War Games again, but it might not be November/December next year. Maybe it's just whenever they feel like it, they can whip it out again.
It's hard. I think that might be a good idea for them. But like we just talked about with Survivor Series, they don't always know when to let it go. So there's every chance that War Games is now every year. And we will always find a reason to have War Games every year. But we're going to have to wait and see, because again, it's a new product for all intents and purposes. My concern is inevitably when Braun does beat Tommaso Ciampa, because I can't see anyone else being the guy who does it. What happens to that title?
I think it's the first one that they change. Oh, it's the first one that they change again, I guess. I don't know if they do what they did last time, where they just change all of them on the same night and everybody gets a new title. I guess except for the women's tag titles, because they just made those. Feels like they just made those yesterday, and there have been like 17 different tag champs, but I digress on that point. But I don't know. They're gonna just change the strap and make it that funky Steiner style 80s, 90s, like you see it at a bowling alley color print. And it's gonna be great. It'll be his title and it'll be unique. Hopefully it looks nice, but I don't know. We talked about this before. I'm with you. I missed the giant X, the big gold X that looked like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but it was bigger than half the wrestlers that won it. But it looked amazing. It was so unique and had style. You could really instantly associate it with what NXT was. I don't know what a new title would look like. I don't hate the current NXT titles. They're fine. They're middle of the road for me, but I wouldn't get rid of them given the option. So I don't know.
I agree. I am a big fan of that original NXT title. I really liked it. I thought it was really cool and unique, and I'm usually a sucker for cool, unique belts, except for the Galactic Anime Championship belt they have in New Japan now, which, to be fair, has been held by your traditional, like, evil British guy. Makes sense. Your traditional, like, shonen babyface with the super mode and a dragon. So I guess it's fine. But anyway, I really did enjoy it. I don't hate any of their current titles. I do disagree about the women's tag team title, though, because it's just the same one as the main roster one, right?
I honestly can't even picture it in my brain right now.
I think it is.
But regardless of that fact, I'm just saying, like, it feels like they made it very, very recently, and to change it so soon would be really weird. Like, I looked up the NXT Women's Tag Team Championship. That is a mouthful. It looks the same as the Men's Tag Team Championship in NXT, with the NXT straight down the middle. Only the strap is white instead of black.
Okay.
So I would agree with you that if you were going to change the NXT Tag Team Championships, you would also need to change the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships to match. Just keep the strap white and the men's black if that's what you felt like doing.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. So here's a question, since we're talking about this. Favorite currently active championship?
Any company?
Any company. Yeah, you know what? First let's do WWE, and then we'll do any company.
Okay. I would have said the United States Championship had they not changed it.
Same.
It was one of my favorite designs ever. Currently, for what they have, running down the titles in my head, I would say either, because I'm a fan of both colors and the way that they look, either one of the women's championships on the main roster. I like both. I like the red and the blue on the white. I think they look very prominent, regal when they're not being thrown on the floor. And they are something that it looks like a championship. It looks like something that I would want to fight for. I think that logo on the white background has looked so much better than what happened when they unveiled the Universal title and it was on the red background. And even maybe the current Universal title on the blue background. I think the white looks incredibly prominent. It makes the center plate pop. It looks awesome. Agreed. So either one of those two, I'd probably lean more toward maybe the red one than the blue one, but just by a hair, I like both.
And that's so funny because I agree with you on every point, except I kind of prefer the blue one to the red one.
You know, it's fine. We can fight over this. We have, how much time left on this podcast?
Actually, technically, I'm pretty sure the rules of those titles don't permit us to fight over them.
That is fair. That is a fair point. By proxy, we can send representatives.
Dibs on Becky Lynch.
I'm not picking Charlotte. How about you? I picked for WWE. What about you for WWE?
For WWE, I'm in the same boat you are. It's the women's title. It's the SmackDown women's title over the Raw women's title. I prefer the blue. I think it's a little bit less bold, and in doing so, it doesn't take away from the rest of what that belt is trying to do.
Okay. Because I know you said you liked them. I just didn't know if they were your favorites.
Oh, yeah. And also to echo you, if they hadn't changed it, it would have been the U.S. title.
Yeah. And if they hadn't changed other titles over time, this would change the further back we go. But
yes.
For right, that's what it is.
Yeah, like as you know full well, my favorite title of all time is the big gold belt, and that will never not be true, because to me, what says world champion better than just a giant hunk of gold on your waist? So
it's one of my favorite championships of all time. That one and the winged eagle are two of my favorites just because growing up, seeing them on TV, seeing some of the really larger than life, I've said really so many times on this podcast, some of the truly larger than life superstars who held those championships at the time made those synonymous with being a champion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if after the big gold belt, I'd probably put the IWGP version 4, the one before the current one, as like my second, and then the WWE Undisputed Championship.
Ooh, that's a nice one.
2002, 2003. Pretty close, actually, with the answer to my next question, which was favorite currently active championship overall, which for me is probably Big Platinum, the AEW World title.
Same. I don't want to just jump to that, but same. I also do like the design of the TBS championship.
Yeah.
Which is not, I guess, currently active because nobody's won it yet. But I do think it looks, as a first design, it looks so much better than the first design of the TNT championship, which I think has grown into a really reputable championship at this point.
Although I'm definitely very disappointed that Sammy doesn't have his own version of it.
Oh, yeah, you want one of those where they just change it for every single person?
I mean, they have so far, except for Cody.
True. Well, Cody's the prototype.
Yeah. So yeah, they have for everyone else. Why wouldn't they for Sammy? Like having the Miro belt be unique is such a weird thing to have done if it wasn't what they were doing moving forward. That I don't.
He wasn't going to hold it for an extensive period of time, where like a Roman Reigns situation. Turning into, oh hey, somebody really needs to take that away from Miro.
Yeah, but there are a lot of really, really awesome championships out there, from the titles that you see on like major shows to some indie ones that have really cool concepts. There are also some really ugly belts, like the WWE Intercontinental Championship.
The current one.
One.
The AEW Big Platinum is probably what I would consider the standard for championship right now, as a world championship anyway. That's the time to look at and say, hey, if I wanted to be recognized as a world champion, this looks better around my waist than anything else.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're talking about AEW, that seems like a good opportunity to transition into Dynamite. And what a Dynamite it was. So we open with what
CM Punk the movie.
What a lot of people, myself included, have been waiting a long time for. MJF and CM Punk in a ring together with microphones. This was awesome. It was pretty much everything I wanted it to be and hoped it would be. It was no holds barred, definitely going at each other's throats. There were a lot of cool pieces to that promo in a lot of different ways, from a lot of different angles. CM Punk is always a joy to listen to. MJF is always a joy to listen to. But giving them more than 20 minutes to promo is a bold decision. And I don't think they needed all that time. Fun as it was, I don't think they needed all that time.
That's a fair point. I think the only reason why they got away with doing it, or leaned into it, and then gave CM Punk a match afterward, which I believe they announced in advance, was that it was in Chicago. So the fans were there to see CM Punk. They were hyped to see CM Punk. So here you go. Here's a half hour, top of the night, a fourth of your show is CM Punk. There you go.
By the way, this is a really interesting thing to bring up too. So last week on Dynamite, Bryan Danielson brings up WrestleMania and gets super heat for it. This week on Dynamite, CM Punk gets the crowd chanting for The Miz.
It's brilliant.
It is. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And I also am so appreciative of how much he seems to like legitimately love Britt Baker. He will always find opportunities to bring her up. It's great. And I love that he like genuinely seems to be like a big fan of hers.
Definitely. I think CM Punk is a bit of a stan for a couple of people in AEW, and he makes it known whenever he can. And he's so good on the mic that he doesn't make it so apparent all the time. He's still there to do his job. He's still there to put himself over and his opponent over in a different way. But he, in several of these promos so far, especially first coming back, he's been very meticulous about who he mentions and when. And it plays into this whole thing with MJF too, of never mentioning MJF this whole time. Perfect. But yeah, Britt Baker is definitely somebody that he's brought up, especially somebody he can't work with really, or isn't going to. I doubt CM Punk is chasing their women's world title anytime soon.
That is probably correct. I do think that we're going to get some more real quality content from them. I really enjoyed it. I'm a huge stan for MJF, and CM Punk is CM Punk, and you can't be our age and not be, high on CM Punk. Right? So I think we're going to get a lot of fun out of that. I don't know what the resolution here is, though. Does MJF beat CM Punk? It's totally possible. Like, I could see that happening. I could see MJF screwing Punk and being the first win. But he also doesn't have to be. He's got a phenomenal record. And losing to a guy like Punk could be the big turning point for his character, where now, 2 years in, he's kind of been doing the same shtick. And sure, like we talked about, he's resolved his things with the pillars for now. But something has to happen next, right? And like they've teased the thing with him and Wardlow, but I don't think we're splitting up the Pinnacle anytime soon. So I think it's way more likely that it becomes here is where we get to see MJF when he doesn't get what he wants, when he can't prove that he is good enough, like here, where, he got under Punk's skin and he's like, all right, but what now?
My betting odds on this one right now, if you told me there's no stipulation on this match whatsoever, CM Punk versus MJF, it's a 50-50. It is a coin flip. I could see it going either way. There's a case for CM Punk's rise to the top, beating people, still keeps going. There's a case for MJF being that first loss, springboarding onto somebody else to be, I don't know where you go with MJF from here, but eventually it's going to be a title picture, as it may be for CM Punk as well. So it's a little bit of what's in the cards in AEW. I'd have to see where everybody else is moving to see where this moves, I think. And I love that. I love not knowing and being so uncertain for two people that kind of want to see either one of them be the one that wins just to see what they'll do.
And how fucking cool is that, right? Like, we probably spend a little more time marking out over this company than is fair. But, man, AEW is just great at presenting these things where we can just be fans. It's hard to be like, all right, well, here's the breakdown and here's what they should do, unless you are constantly listening to Cornette. But barring that, here, there's so many different routes they can take, and so few of them are bad, which is the really exciting part of it. Even if they go the way you don't want them to, it doesn't make for bad programming. What was the next match on the card that night? Do you remember?
For Dynamite?
It was CM Punk versus...
It was CM Punk versus QT Marshall.
Oh, right. Okay. We don't really have much to say there, right?
Yeah, we can skip that.
CM Punk wins. Yay.
Yeah. Then there was the next match in the women's title tournament.
That was Thunder Rosa and Jamie Hayter, right?
Yes.
That was a good match.
Yeah.
That was a good match.
I enjoyed that one as well. I don't have too much to say about it because I think we all expected a Thunder Rosa victory. Thunder Rosa is very good in the ring. She is one of the few women on that roster that connects with the crowd in a big way. They pop for her huge sometimes, which is great. So I think I expected her to make finals probably in this tournament when they put the brackets up at the beginning. And seeing her go through Jamie Hayter, they're planting the seeds for the Hayter and Baker split piece by piece, very, very slowly. But I like it. From the promos backstage where Reba, not Rebel, is constantly doing the DMD with her and kind of nudging Hayter, like, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you supposed to be doing it too? Come on, be on the team. To some of these skits that Baker's a part of, Hayter's not there. And now you have an actual miscommunication where Baker costs Hayter the match. And I'm hoping they don't split them immediately, but eventually it'll happen. And when it does, the seeds are there. It's good long-term storytelling.
No, yeah, absolutely. So just real quick, I want to talk a little bit about both of these women. My first exposure to Thunder Rosa was Cobra Moon in Lucha Underground. She did such a fantastic job there, and I've kind of tried to follow her career as best as I could since. And she really is just such a great talent. She has such a good energy, and she does do a great job with just getting the fans rallied on her side, even though, if we're being honest, her promo skills are not the best. But that's okay, because her energy doesn't come from her ability to cut promos. Her energy comes from how she comes out, how she interacts on her way to the ring, what she does in the ring. She has such an explosive moveset, which is great. And I think that it may not have been her best match this past week, but it definitely was a strong one. Jamie Hayter is another person who... So she's been talented for years, but what an amazing transformation she has gone through over the last couple of years, leading her here to AEW. Especially since her last showing with this company, which was before the first episode of Dynamite when she teamed up with Bea Priestley, who is now
Blair Davenport.
So seeing Jamie Hayter come back to this company after her huge change and just kind of reinvention of herself after so much success in Stardom was really cool. Seeing her paired up with Britt Baker makes a lot of sense because she's probably going to be the engine that turns Britt into a real face eventually, and in the meantime gets so much exposure just by being with them in a way that the fans may not have responded to her otherwise, because she's just another name that some people will and most people won't recognize otherwise. So this was smart. The match was good. The way that they are presenting her with Britt Baker, like you said, is really smart. And I'm very, very excited for Thunder Rosa and Jade Cargill. Jade Cargill is probably my favorite of the AEW babies, for lack of a better term, in the women's division. I'm so high on Jade Cargill, and I have so much hope for her. Here's my thing, though. So, does Thunder Rosa beat her? Probably. But also, if we look at the other side of the card, I become less confident. Because the other side of this tournament has Nyla Rose probably against Ruby Soho. I don't think Kris Statlander beats Ruby Soho. So then the question becomes, do they put Nyla over Ruby? And I'm not super convinced about that. Do they do the thing that they do sometimes, where we get face versus face? They're not afraid to make that decision, and that can happen too. I think that no matter what, though, any of these 4, potentially 5, if we include Statlander, women will put on such an incredible match, and every single one of them would be a legitimate TBS inaugural champion. The question becomes, do they want to go with a homegrown AEW talent like Nyla, who I know is probably the least likely to win because she benefits the least from having that title? But do they go with Nyla or Jade, who I think is a perfect fit for it? Or do they say, okay, we know that people like these characters and we don't want to have 2 heel women's champions at the same time, and Thunder Rosa has been chomping at the bit, so we can give it to her, we can give it to Ruby, although that could feel a bit like a consolation prize, or we could give it to Kris Statlander, who has been really on that verge the entire time she's been here. She's grown and built and grown and built and grown and built and feels like she's just waiting for that opportunity. And that's why I'm a little hesitant to say Ruby beats her anyway, because her beating Ruby doesn't really hurt Ruby, but would catapult Chris Statlander into a position where she feels like a legitimate talent. And then if she makes the finals and faces like Jade Cargill, all of a sudden we've got a match with two people who AEW made prominent, even if only one of them is like their person, fighting for this title, and it will look good no matter what.
I love everything about what you just said. I don't think there's a wrong answer for a first champion, especially for a mid-card women's championship on a show that has a rapidly improving women's division, but still nowhere near the best women's division. And I like so many of these people, but much like the Full Gear pair of matches of Miro versus Danielson and Adam Page versus Kenny Omega, you looked and said, well, one of these is probably the least likely, and it's Omega versus Miro for the heel versus heel. The rest of them are far more likely. The least likely seems to be a Nyla versus Jade match, right? I'd figure heel versus heel is not something they're probably going to push for, which makes the others increasingly more likely. And as you said, babyface is not something they shy away from. I wonder how high they value Statlander now with the influx of other talent that's come in. I would hope it's still as high as they did, because I personally think she's a hell of a talent and deserves, at the very least, to be getting title shots to showcase that talent. I'd love, and this is just to play fantasy booker for a second, if they gave Statlander and Ruby enough time to go to like a draw or something, and rather than eliminate both of them, they did the very rare AEW triple threat match of both of them and Nyla, and then you can have whomever take the fall and somebody else doesn't lose, and then you have somebody make finals. That I think would be amazing. Probably not going to happen, but still, I'd love it if they got that time and investment as one of the signs that it was at the most recent shows of, hey, AEW, can you book more than one women's match per show, please? Thank you. If they would do that on something that's not like Dark or Elevation, awesome. I think they can. Here's a great opportunity to do so. If you can't do more than one match, can we have one match that goes really long? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Shout out to whoever brought that sign, because that's something that's, I think, been on all our minds for a very long time. They, especially now, have so much more fantastic women's talent, and they have to start showcasing them. I understand, and I think we talked about this last episode too. I understand that that's their weakest audience, but this is why. This is why that's their weakest audience, and they can fix that. They just have to start investing in it. They have so many different shows that they put on, and now they're going to have these TV specials, which hopefully will give them more of an opportunity to do that. So we can only hope and see what happens moving forward. Having the second title feels like their way of kind of committing themselves. Okay, now we have this, we have to give you more of this content. And their women's roster is very quickly approaching a point where they cannot afford to not display more of them, even with their rotating.
And they're doing something that is somewhat the inverse of what I was talking about before with Survivor Series. So with Survivor Series, you have a pay-per-view where the entire pay-per-view is full of gimmick matches, and the pay-per-view itself is a gimmick pay-per-view of, now it's brand supremacy, but nothing's actually on the line, so people don't get invested. Whereas you, with AEW, at the very least, they're saying, okay, you may not be super invested in our women's division, maybe because we haven't been super invested in our women's division for the first couple of years of our show, but we've always treated our titles well, with respect. So if we create another title for women to fight for and defend, that's something that automatically is going to get placement on our show. We are promising you that by creating this, it has a spot in our lineup. So therefore, we promise we're invested. Now, hey, hopefully you'll be invested too. and where it's a little bit of like, we'll bring this to the table if you come to the table and at least give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm hoping that that's what that means, and that's what we see moving forward. While we're on the topic of the women's division, I'm going to jump forward just a little bit to the Britt Baker Riho Black Friday super sellout deal whatever match. So I know that you, just like myself, are not a fan of the beat the champion to get a title match setup. This is maybe the second time that I can recall AEW having done it, so I'm not too overtly bothered by it. I think it's fine for now. I'm a big fan of the idea that Riho continues to be Britt Baker's white whale. And I think that's going to change soon because I'm assuming Battle of the Belts is going to be where we see like Danielson versus Hangman and Riho versus Britt and Sammy versus whoever the challenger of the week is for him and whatever else. But I'm expecting it to change there. But I think having her win here, especially the way she did with that kind of snap, roll up sort of thing, out of them going back and forth the way they did, is a perfect setup for that. Riho just got the better of her here, but she is getting better, and she is the women's champion, and she should be, and I think she'll get that win back soon.
Yeah, and to add to that a little bit of that Saturday show, I believe it's a Saturday show, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that show is possibly going to feature, if we have all the titles on the line, we're going to have a world championship match of Hangman Adam Page versus Bryan Danielson, the women's championship match that you just mentioned of Riho versus Baker, the probably challenger of the week for the TNT championship, maybe the finals, although they might have the finals of the TBS title on TBS that first show, but maybe the first defense of that title, possibly, even if they run back finals, that would be pretty cool. And a tag title match, which may be the Lucha Bros versus Jurassic Express, which could be pretty awesome too, because they mentioned this week that they are the number one contenders. And Christian said in his promo, I almost in a I'm about to turn heel on you guys kind of way, but I hope not, of the I guarantee that with me in your corner, you guys are going to win those championships. So here's hoping, but still, that card for something that seems very thrown together on short notice is unbelievably stacked and is going to start the year off with something that might be one of the best shows of the entire year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. And I hope that it's the pace setter for the rest of these specials. They will pretty much be taking the place of pay-per-views in the way that like WWE sets up their shows. So they will have the opportunity to have these big matches continue on their weekly shows while also having these sort of blowouts when they go back to TNT that allow them to kind of set up. They called their original pay-per-views like tentpole shows, right? So if those are the tent poles, these are going to sort of be the pittons that hold the rest of it in, right? Which I think is a really cool idea. And I'm excited to see how this one goes. I'm excited to see how the second one goes because I think that'll be really telling too. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. For now, you're right. We've got a huge event coming up in not too long. And while I don't think Jurassic Express will be winning the tag titles, I would not be surprised if Christian is Christian. And I'll just kind of leave it there. We did, however, miss a match. We missed a match that I do want to bring up just for a second because there are two things I want to say about it. So before we had the TBS quarterfinals match, we had for the second or third week in a row, the Ass Boys were on TV. I was not sold on turning them heel initially because who cares? Since then, they do seem like they're a pretty useful utility to have access to. And, that's not really surprising. Billy Gunn is Billy Gunn, so his kids, of course, are going to be able to do something. And also, I am so glad to see Bear Country again because I love that tag team. They are great, and I was very concerned at having not seen them for a while.
Me too. So I was going to bring them up to you a couple weeks ago because I hadn't seen them in such a long time, and I was making a list of all the tag teams in AEW because they have so many of them. They are stacked in tag teams, and I like them too. I don't know what their ceiling is in AEW, but as a team that comes out and looks intimidating and looks like a team, they fit the bill. 10 out of 10 on that one. Perfect. And for the Gun Club, also check on whichever one got tackled by Darby at 150 miles per hour, because man, for the tiniest guy on the roster, okay, I know he's not actually the tiniest guy on the roster, but for one of the smallest guys on the roster, that was some serious impact.
Yeah, he comes out like a bullet. He and Ilya Dragunov both have that ability to just be these really explosive little packages where somehow they just build up these incredible speeds and fling themselves at you, and you're like, holy shit, are they dead?
It's amazing. And it also shows how they know what they're doing with Darby Allin takes these big pay-per-view losses, 2 in a row now, kind of needs to build a little momentum back. And here he is. He's building a little bit of momentum back. A lot of momentum on that tackle, but a little bit in terms of getting a win here, getting a win there. He and Sting play really nicely together.
Oh, yeah.
As you said, the Gun Club, they're there for a reason. They can work. They're not going to be main event talent. I don't know how they had them go such a long time being undefeated on Dark, but all right, sure. Why not? Use it. They're using it. Good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Dark is for, really. And as for Sting and Darby Allin, they're facing 2.0 next week, right? That's exciting.
Okay. I
think
see it.
I think that's what was announced. I'm pretty hyped for that. I'm really glad Sting is getting to sort of redo his final bits of his career, because, you know, they did not go ideally, and there's a lot of things that people probably would have wanted to see or experience, himself included, that just didn't happen. And I'm glad he's getting this opportunity now. I really hope, I know it's unlikely, especially now that we've got crowds back, but I would love to see just one more cinematic match with him and like Darby, because it was so perfectly done the first time.
I think there's room for that, especially if Sting wants to hang it up or even reduce his role further. Maybe he's no longer going to come out with Darby. Darby takes a different path going forward and they split up or something like that. I think there's totally room for Sting and Darby, who Darby leans into some of these cinematic packages sometimes before his matches, to be able to work something with someone else. They have so many people in AEW now who are creative, powerful individuals with unique voices and characters. And you're telling me they can't put something together? They can definitely put something together.
Okay, so then moving on to our next match. So this was so perfect. Danielson and Colt Cabana. Okay, so I don't dislike Colt Cabana. I think Colt Cabana is a lot of fun. With that said, I do and have for a long time gotten an almost sick pleasure out of watching Colt Cabana get his ass kicked, because he's so good at it. He's so good at getting beat up. And this was no exception. Watching the two of them go at it was great. There's a moment when Brian has him on the ground and gets both his hands, and you know he's about to do the like repeated stomps, where Colt just looks up at him and is shaking his head, and he's just like, no. And Brian gets this just like deep grin, and he's just like, oh yes, and then just starts stomping him out. And I thought that was great. Watching that match was phenomenal. Again, it's a good example of how you look at a guy like Colt and you look at a guy like Brian, they're not on the same level as far as how they're being presented. There is no question about who's winning. There's no question about how the match goes. But that doesn't mean Colt doesn't get offense in. That doesn't mean Colt can't find a couple opportunities. You can still make the guy look good while getting his ass kicked, and they do a really good job of that here. Bryan and Colt, they know each other so well in the ring, and it really translated. It was very enjoyable to watch, and he just sort of had this almost unabashed glee as he went about beating up Colt Cabana, which I thought was really good.
And we didn't get to talk about heel Bryan Danielson, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful seeing him rejoice in that in a way that he never got to in WWE, and put that unique spin on, I guess it's Tony Khan's mad genius of booking all the city dates of all the members of the Dark Order, where he can go and one by one go through them. So you know what you're getting week to week. You can expect him winning, but I'm also really glad this week that they went ahead and had Hangman come out and confront him immediately. Like, no, guy, I'm not going to let you go through everybody. Let's stop that right now. It's not because I don't have confidence in them. It's, I'm not afraid of you. Let's have this match. We could have it right now. And for Danielson to be the perfect heel of course you would say that because I just had a match. It's 101. Textbook 101 babyface and heel mentality. This stuff was done in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, that type of stuff of white meat babyface versus coward heel. They're doing it, except these guys are so talented. They're so amazing at what they do. You believe Bryan Danielson is a killer who could beat every single member of the Dark Order, and in the case of this week, knock a tooth out. And hopefully he gets that tooth repaired soon. But Hangman, he has confidence in his friends now, and he wants to defend them. He doesn't think they need to be defended in the ring. He didn't go out with them, but he will come out and say, hey, no, you're bullying my friends. That's not cool. Yeah, we have a match. Fight me.
One of the things I really enjoyed about this week with heel Bryan is he brought back something from WWE that was so perfect here. The fickle. And it's so perfect for the run he's having now, with how it effectively took him mentioning WrestleMania and claiming a challenge that he had the right to claim to turn him heel. That's all it took. All it took was him being like, well, I'm going to fight Hangman because I won that right, and I should be allowed to fight Hangman, and also, I was at WrestleMania. I'm a big deal. And that was it. That's all it took for the fans to be like, oh my goodness, boo this fucking man.
And a third part to that of, also, I'm a little disappointed because I don't get to face Kenny Omega again right now.
Yeah.
Yep. Not even like, oh man, I wish Kenny beat you, but like, no, that match that everybody loved, you don't get that again.
Yeah, I wanted to run that back. Oh, you
you're the worst. How could you? It's somehow he managed in WWE to make people boo him for saying, hey, we should be environmentally friendly.
Well, considering the company, that's not all that surprising. That's the bad guy.
Definitely fair, but he's a heel because he makes an eco-friendly title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and actually, I wanted to bring up. So he had a podcast interview. I forget where it was, or I would credit them. I'll try and put it in like the comments on YouTube or something. But he had an interview where he talked about his favorite point in WWE was being the planet's champion. Because A, he got to step out of the yes box that became everything they wanted him to be all the time because it moved merchandise. And B, he got to push a legitimate message that he actually cares about while also, feeding the heat from the fans. And he's having so much fun now being here, doing what he's doing because, yeah, he gets to come out and be like, well, I want to have the best matches I can have. And I want to beat the piss out of you, and I want you to beat the piss out of me, and that's what I want to do. Let's do that. But me doing that and being kind of a jerk because I know that I'm that guy gets you to boo me, and it's fantastic. He's having the time of his life getting to be that person again, and really in a way he hasn't since he signed with the WWE the first time.
Yeah, there are heels that play characters that deliberately try to get cheap heat. There are heels that play characters that are very much themselves, unfortunately. And there are heels that go out of their way to be these heinous, exaggerated, terrible people, or sometimes even beyond people, to get the heat that they need to get. Sometimes you don't like people in life, and it has nothing to do with the content of their message. It's just how they deliver it. They're saying it in ways that are rude, and it makes you not like them. It's abrasive. Bryan Danielson is a master at that. He will tell you things, and he will say things that I agree with a lot of his messages. As a fan of AEW, I want to see Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega again. If you put the title in that match, that's a match of the year candidate right there. Sign me up. I want to see it. If you want to give me Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Adam Page, and you want to say, hey, here you go, here's a match, and Bryan Danielson is going to be the next champion, okay, cool. I'm a fan of his. I would like to see that. If you want to see Bryan Danielson really let loose and kick ass and beat people up, yeah, okay. Let him do all the things he couldn't do in WWE. Awesome. Let's go. But he says it in such a way where he's like, no, I'm going to destroy your hero. I actually kind of wish your hero lost. I'm going to beat up all of his friends week to week in their hometowns. I'm not agreeing to fight on your terms because you're a coward and I'm a fighter. And it just rubs all the people the wrong way. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. He did just have a match. He would be at a disadvantage going into a title match. He's not wrong. There are so many years where we've looked at people being booked and taking matches after just having a match, and you're sitting looking back as a fan saying, wow, they're an idiot. I would never do something like that. And he just did it, but he did it in a way that now you hate him for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really, those are the best heels. The best heels are the ones who are completely validated in what they're saying and what they're doing, who will go out there and make a claim and back that claim up, preferably in a way that doesn't require cheating or underhanded tactics, and just be like, yeah, go ahead, boo me for it. Go ahead. You're gonna boo me for it, and I'm still gonna be right, and I'm still gonna not face this guy after having a match, because why would I throw away my title shot on that against, the guy I didn't prefer to face, but because I like putting on the best matches, and now I have to do it with you instead.
I'll just give a very quick shout out to Ring of Honor for that, because I feel like they bred a lot of people that are very good at doing that, like Bryan Danielson. Samoa Joe is good at that. You have Kevin Owens is very, very good at that. These are guys who came out of a similar era, a similar style, similar environment, who learned how to, probably in front of very similar audiences, work that type of behavior. And it still translates very strongly right now. And not everybody's good at it. Not everybody can do it, but they can.
The legitimate heel. Yep, absolutely. And you beat me to it, but I was absolutely going to give Ring of Honor props for that, because it is probably one of the biggest impacts they had on the business, is giving that particular concept of character a platform, which existed before then, but didn't really get the following it did prior to them. Okay, so after that, we've got the main event, which was Cody and Death Triangle versus Malachi Black again, and Andrade and FTR. I have a couple thoughts on this. I have one moment that I think was pretty funny, but also, unfortunately, I have to preface with other stuff, so we'll get to that. But the first thing I want to say is, I don't know what, if anything, the plan is, but I need them to get FTR and Andrade away from each other. I don't have an issue with their styles. They work together perfectly fine, but FTR are already part of a group, and I like that they're part of that group, and I don't mind them being loaned out once in a blue, but this is happening a lot now, and Andrade does need people. And with so many names that they have signed and probably are planning to sign and have plans for, they have to make plans to put someone with Andrade. I don't know how long you can be the rich kind of pseudo mob boss style character and not have guys behind you, actual guys, not someone else's guys. And meanwhile, Malachi Black definitely needs to go do his thing. His promos are still fire. His matches are phenomenal. He needs to be... What he's doing with Cody is great. I think it's finished and we need to move on. I think there's so many people for him to keep working with. I think that whatever long-term story he is looking to tell, because he is one of those guys, the devil is in the details, right? And we'll get wherever we're going. I don't care if you put him with people or if not. But either way, I think we need to just move on. For all of these guys, for all of them, we just need to move on. One more, I know we have one more Lucha Brothers FTR match, which is next week. I think
so, yes.
Okay, so we have one more Lucha Brothers FTR match next week, and then please take all of these guys away from each other for a while. I don't think that's too much to ask.
Definitely not. This is almost the WWE formula of you had 2 pay-per-view matches and you just took them and put them together on a weekly show. And that's what this is. This is literally what this is. And somehow I enjoyed it more than both of the pay-per-view matches just because it felt like the condensed version of one and there was a point to the other one. And I agree with what you're saying. I wish there was somebody that was clearly lined up for each one of them to move on to, because everything feels a little crowded right now, especially here. Maybe least of all for the Lucha Bros, because as tag champions, they can have contenders lined up for days. But for the rest of them, what do you do? Where do you go? I'm very, very curious about Malachi Black and Pac and Andrade. As I've said, talked about in Full Gear, of I like these guys. I like these characters. They're so amazing in the ring. The fluidity of the finish of the match, of Black just running around kicking and kneeing people like crazy just to prevent a pin from being broken up. Awesome. He's so precise with those kicks. Even when he misses, it feels like they connect at such a high impact that it does significant damage. It looks dangerous, but as far as I know, he's never really hurt anybody. So points to him for that.
Yeah.
But it comes back to Cody again. Where does Cody go? I'm interested with almost a morbid curiosity of what does he do? Does he just go away and then come back? Who of these guys are going to be on a Battle of the Belts show? 2 of them are going to be tag team champions, so they're in. But what do the rest of them do? Are they all left off? Because that's 4 big names, well, 6 big names really, that wouldn't be on that show. And I don't think you want them facing each other again.
So I don't think that any of them, with the exception of, probably the Lucha Brothers, are going to be on that show unless Cody has like a, hi, I exist, I'm still Cody Rhodes, segment. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Pac has been getting a lot more exposure as of late. Andrade's been doing his thing. Black is, working things out. I don't know that you need them because it's not really the focus of that show. With that said, yeah, they still are kind of in a spot because they need to keep putting these people in front of the TV and in front of or on the TV and in front of fans, and can't keep doing what they're doing. And you're right. It feels very much like a WWE move, which, if you will recall, is kind of what I've been saying about Cody for a while now, is he is a WWE character who exists in a WWE bubble on a different program. And this is more of that. Which brings me to the next thing I want to bring up about this match. So, first, Cody Rhodes seems like a really nice guy. now that we've said that, we can really take a moment and appreciate that Chicago will always be up there as one of the smarkiest towns in the world. Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, these are places that you go and you know what the crowd's going to be like. So, when Cody takes off his belt and throws it into the crowd, like he does every week, except when he gives it to like someone who's purposefully put in the front row. When he takes off his belt and he throws it into the crowd, this guy who catches it waits. He takes his time. He waits until Cody tags out of the match, turns around, holds the belt up so Cody can be like, fuck yeah, you got it, man. Good for you. And then throws that thing back in the ring. And he doesn't like toss it. He doesn't like, I don't want this. He rockets, like jettisons that thing off. And it hits Aubrey, which is very unfortunate. But like, whew, and the look on Cody's face. My goodness. This is a man who just died inside. And I'm sorry, but it was fucking hilarious.
It totally was. And then you have Andrade, who is smart, but a heel. And it was a little weird to do this, but he grabs the thing and he throws it under the ring to applause. Because everybody's like, yeah, we don't want your belt. Suck it. And then Cody gets it back because he has somebody from the production crew or a stagehand bring it back to him in the middle of the match. And he noticeably gets it and puts it on. It's not during a commercial break or something. It's on TV. He's standing on the babyface side of the ring, clearly visible on hard cam, putting this belt back on. And the crowd boos him relentlessly. Does it detract from the match? Yes.
Absolutely.
Does it take away from the talent in the ring? Yes. Is it hilarious? Yes. Do I want to know what the hell is going on with Cody and why he is engaging in this behavior? What the hell is going on in his brain when he's making these choices?
Yeah.
Kinda I do.
Yeah, that very much was one of those moments where it felt less like a character or a meta thing that he's trying to push and felt like the crowd got to him and he was just like, yeah, fuck you. And, you know, I get it. Look, it's a lot of pressure. He's been having some hard times recently with other stuff. And I don't blame him for, you know, potentially losing his cool, especially in the way he did, which was definitely pretty low key considering alternatives. But yeah, it detracted from the match. It was very unfortunate. It was hilarious. And hopefully when he got backstage, someone was like, Cody, are you okay? Okay, good. What the fuck? Yeah. But it was a solid match. It was good. The other thing I want to bring up about it that was a lot of fun is I love when we get these Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard teases. Just there's so much history there and there's so much going on. And it was so perfect the way that like they had their little square off and then Jose gets in the ring and they're like, what? Fuck this guy. Yeah, all in all, it was a good match to end the program, both their program and the show. And Malachi Black with the mist, I'm a big fan of. I expect and hope we'll keep seeing it, and I think it fits him very well.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things, talking about Bryan Danielson before, of he's a legitimate heel who can beat you. He's winning his matches clean, ruthlessly. He's bludgeoning people, and that's how he wins. But he's a bad guy because of how he talks. Malachi Black can beat you. He can beat you ruthlessly, quickly, viciously. But he also can use some underhanded tactics to win. And that's one of those things where it's a little bit of a supernatural element. Sometimes he plays into that like occult, behavior, the House of Black stuff. We don't know where that's going. But still, the Mist, when done right, is awesome. I know it doesn't always look the best, but when it does, it's so good. And he's nailed it so far every time he's used it, as I said before, with his striking. But go back and watch the ending of that match. He is so precise to hit the mist, then flip over, come into the ring, run over, nail the shot to, I believe it was Cody, and Andrade picks up the win. Perfect timing. He's so fluid in his motions, and his execution is top level. So is Pac. He's another guy, I think, that match who is just so precise in every move that he makes. Give me more of this. That's a program I don't mind entertaining.
I think that's inevitable. I think Pac Black is going to happen maybe sooner than later, and boy, I can't wait for it. So that's it for AEW this week, and I don't know if there's much else to really discuss.
I do want to briefly give a shout out to Tegan Knox and some of the other people who have been released.
Oh man,
specifically Isaiah Swerve Scott. I think those two names in particular are people that I hope land in cushy places that will pay them well and give them an opportunity to work.
Because they 100% deserve it and will live up to the paycheck hands down.
Yeah, and Tegan coming back from so many injuries, so many of the same injury repeatedly. That's something where she's lucky to be able to do that, and she has persevered and stuck with it. I'm a big fan of everything she's shown. I'm a huge nerd, and I know she is too, in the Captain Marvel way of give her something, let her achieve that. Come on. I was shocked they let her go. Swerve finally hits his stride in WWE this year. He finally gets that stage. He wins a championship. They call him up to the main roster with a group. They give him a group to work with, and now the entire group is gone. And he's somebody that I think came in through the Cruiserweight tournament that they did several years back, got a contract, never really had too much momentum behind him at any point in time. They finally turn him heel. He gets a little edge to him. Still not really a whole bunch of momentum until this year. It really took off for him. The vignettes, the matches were always there. The quality was always there for him. But to give him the group, to give them a pretty unique thing in WWE to do, to be like a rap recording group, and then call them up to the main roster, and it seemed like they were going to actually have a program. They may have been a good chunk of a Survivor Series team if they did this the right way. And now they're all gone. And of course, I want him to land somewhere successful, where he can work and do something, because of course he's got the talent. But if the whole group went together somewhere, I wouldn't mind that either.
I would love that.
Of course he's the highlight, but give these people an opportunity. I know wrestling isn't always like a package deal place, but something for these people, hopefully. And I know you mentioned to me John Morrison being another one that is worth mentioning, where you could speak more to this with his relationship with Taya Valkyrie, right?
Yeah.
And her coming in and not leaving and all of that stuff, which is unfortunate that this is all in the name of budget cuts.
So that one frustrates me a lot. John Morrison made a decision to sign with a company. I have to assume the major reason for it was, financial stability and an easy paycheck. Actually, this reminds me of something else Bryan Danielson said in his interview that I'm going to bring up here because it's really good. When he signed with WWE and he met with William Regal said to him, you have to understand, the money that you're being paid for this company is for the work you did to get here. Getting pushed, getting a title, getting put anywhere is the cherry on top. But the money you're making here isn't for what you do here. It's for what got you here. And which I think is very important for people to understand. And Morrison, he got that, and he knew what he was doing coming in. There was no way he was going to be a world champion. There was no way he was going to be a main eventer in the WWE. It was very clear what their stock in him was. And he could have gone anywhere else and continued to be a top guy. But he came here for a check, And more likely than not, he came here because his wife has always wanted to work for this company, probably doesn't have a great chance of doing so otherwise, because she, while being, in my opinion, one of the most talented women in the business right now, is just not what they want in a women's talent for their company. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a big part of it too. So, he signed, he resigns himself to being, the mid-card guy and kind of the butt of the joke a lot of the time and whatnot. And he, she gets her contract and it happens. And, in the time she's there, they don't use her very much. And that sucked. And the fact that they released her while he was across seas in the UK on a tour, and so she was going home to an empty house that they had just moved into, that kind of sucked. And the fact that they released him as soon as he got back from that tour, that kind of sucked. These whole things sucked. And then today he posts a video talking about it, and we find out, and this rubs an already raw spot for me. So he got the call from Laurinaitis, and budget cuts, because of course it is. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't wish him luck in his future endeavors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
Yeah. And you know what? Fuck that company. I'll say it. Fuck it. Fuck that. That sucks. On top of, and that's not the only reason. Like, I could stand here and time myself and rant for the next 10 minutes, but it's not going to accomplish anything. There's a lot of shitty things that companies done for a long time, but even in the last 2 years, even in the last 1 year, even in the last 6 months, man, that sucks. That sucks. That sucks a lot. And I hope that it doesn't have a major impact on them, because in my opinion, they're one of the best couples in wrestling, and they're both incredibly talented, both on a microphone, bell to bell. I am very excited to see what happens to them next, and I hope to see a lot of them moving forward. But yeah, it's just more of the same frustration that builds with this company and how they look at and treat and book their talent. At least we won't have to watch him and The Miz have like 10 matches.
Thankfully.
I think Hit Row would be a great to kind of bring us back to an upswing before we sign off. Hit Row would be, I think, a phenomenal addition to the Impact roster as a whole. I think they fit the vibe so well. Swerve can go wherever he wants, right? The others are a lot greener and whatever. But as a group, I would love to see them continue. They were a very unique idea. They felt very good, and I would like to see that continue somewhere. If it doesn't, okay, that's a shame and a missed opportunity, but there will still be opportunities. Tegan Knox, I mean, do you not immediately snap her up if you're Tony Khan?
Yeah, there are so many places where I could see her going. I think, unfortunately for her, a lot of her closest friends that she has in the wrestling business are all still with WWE.
Yeah, and will be for quite a while.
Yeah, that's a sad one. But I know she's from the UK, right? So I don't know if she goes back home. I don't know if she's still looking at it as. I can't imagine somebody who's put in so much work to come back repeatedly from these injuries would see this as the death blow to their career. But if she wants to take some time off or really be at 100%, because I know that the tail end here, she was not getting used to do much of anything. And she needs to do that. She needs to take some time. If she doesn't, if she has a 90-day no compete and then she's back in the 91st day, by all means, please, pick a name, give me some more. I'm there for it. I was entertained by her. I wanted to see where her story was going. And yeah, if you're Tony Khan, by all means, grab her. If not, please go challenge for the NWA Women's Championship. Go over to Impact. Go. I don't know where else you want to go. If there's someplace in Europe that you want to be, go be there. Do what you want to do. Live your life, Tegan, please. but do it on TV where I can watch on occasion.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. And we could go over a lot of these names, and there's a lot of them who I hope land somewhere where we get to see them regularly. Not everyone will. Some will, and that's great. Some won't, and that's a shame. But I think that it's 2021 is a much better time to be getting released from the WWE than like 2016, 2017. So, it's not the end of the line for a lot of these people. And I think that that's been proven. And I think that sort of hopeful positivity is probably a good place for us to call it for this episode. So,
fingers crossed optimism.
Agreed. So, from myself and Joe, thank you for tuning in. If you're listening on YouTube, please like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you're listening anywhere else, please make sure you follow us to make sure you know when the latest episode is out. You can always reach out to me at TheLionKnight42 on Twitter with thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns. We love feedback, so please throw it our way.